someone cut you off in traffic this morning, you felt it in your chest before you felt it in your mind. The heat, the tightening, the sudden certainty that this stranger had wronged you personally, cosmically, deliberately. And you reacted. Maybe you honked. Maybe you cursed. Maybe you just seethed. That quiet, burning reaction that cost you the next 20 minutes of your life while the other driver has already forgotten you exist. That is where your defeat began. Not in traffic. In the moment your inner state was handed over to an external event like a sword placed in an enemy's hand. You lost before the day started. This is not a metaphor. This is not a comfort story dressed in ancient robes. This is the exact mechanism by which most of your suffering is manufactured. Not by the world, not by other people, not by fate, but by the fraction of a second between stimulus and response that you have never once treated as a battleground. Marcus Aurelius commanded the largest empire on earth and spent his nights writing to himself about self-command. Not strategy, not conquest, self-command. He understood something that you have probably never been told plainly. The man who cannot rule himself cannot rule anything. And the man who reacts, who lets the outside world reach inside and pull the lever of his emotion, is not ruling himself. He is being ruled constantly by traffic, by emails, by a tone of voice, by a notification, by the expression on someone's face across a room. Ask yourself this honestly. How many times today have you reacted, not responded, reacted? There is a difference so fundamental that getting it wrong costs you your life one moment at a time. A response is chosen. It emerges from the commanding faculty, what Marcus called the Hegemonikon, the rational sovereign at the center of your being. A reaction bypasses it entirely. A reaction is the empire governing itself while the emperor sleeps. You are sleeping. That is the wound. And here is what makes it worse. You have been taught to call your reactions authenticity. You have been told that feeling everything immediately, expressing everything impulsively, wearing your emotional state on your face and in your voice, this is being real. The philosophy of the reaction has been sold to you as freedom. It is the most effective cage ever built, because you maintain it yourself. You lock the door. You hand someone the key without knowing it, the rude colleague, the dismissive partner, the stranger online, and you call it having feelings. Marcus Aurelius had feelings. He buried children. He governed an empire while being betrayed by generals, undermined by senators, surrounded by men who wanted him dead or diminished. He experienced grief, frustration, ingratitude, and exhaustion that would collapse most people reading this. And he wrote. Not for publication, never for publication. He wrote to himself the same instruction over and over in different forms, because the battle never ended. Do not add to what has happened. 5 words. The entire architecture of self-command in 5 words. What happened, happened. The thing that destroys you is the story you tell about what happened. The emotion you pour into it, the reaction you issue in response to it, the addition. You are not suffering the original wound. You are suffering every reopening of it that your own mind performs. That is the wound. Not what the world did to you, what you do after what the world did to you. And if you think this is merely about staying calm, if you think Marcus Aurelius was teaching stress management, you have not yet understood what is being asked of you. This is not about calm. It is about sovereignty. The calm is simply the evidence that you still hold the throne. Keep watching, because the enemy is not outside you. It never was. If these words carved an echo within your void do not turn back, the descent has just begun. Click below, subscribe, and claim your reality. Marcus Aurelius inherited Stoic philosophy the way a soldier inherits a sword, not to display, but to use. And the central weapon of Stoic psychology, the one he returned to obsessively in the Meditations, is the doctrine of the impression. Every experience that reaches you arrives first as an impression. Phantasia in the Greek he thought in. Something happens in the world. Your senses receive it. Your mind forms an impression of it. And here Here is where everything is decided. Because between the impression and your response to it sits the most important real estate in your existence. Assent, the act of the hegemonikon either accepting or refusing the impression's claim on you. The impression arrives and says, "This is an insult, you have been disrespected. React." And most people, without pausing, without knowing they have a choice, assent. They agree. They hand the impression complete authority over their next action. Marcus calls this living in the passive voice. The thing happens to you. You are object, not subject. And you spend your entire life wondering why you feel powerless, while never once examining the moment where the power was surrendered. Here is a real man, a project manager, mid-level, competent, passed over for promotion. He gets the email on a Tuesday. His stomach drops. Before he has finished reading the final sentence, the reaction is already happening. The narrative is already building. I am not valued. I have been overlooked. This is unfair. This is personal. By lunch, he is rehearsing the grievance. By evening, he is performing it for his partner. By Thursday, the resentment has calcified into something he carries into every meeting, every interaction, every performance review. Until the next promotion cycle, he is no longer working toward anything. He is working against something. The impression from Tuesday is still governing his behavior 10 weeks later. He never questioned the impression. He never exercised assent. He handed a Tuesday email total authority over his inner state and then called the result his career situation. Marcus would diagnose this not as injustice, but as self-abandonment. The promotion was external, indifferent, in the precise Stoic meaning of the word, not meaningless, but outside the sphere of the will. What is inside the sphere of the will, what Marcus calls ta hemin, the things that are up to us, is the judgment made about the impression, not the promotion, the story told about the promotion. This distinction is not semantic, it is surgical, because what Marcus is revealing is that you have been fighting the wrong enemy your entire life. You fight circumstances, you fight other people, you fight events and outcomes and the behavior of others. And every fight in that territory is a fight you cannot win, because that territory does not belong to you. The Stoics call it preferred indifference. Things you can pursue, but things that when they do not arrive, cannot be permitted to reach inside and operate your psychology. The moment they do, you have colonized yourself. Now apply this inward. Because the diagnosis gets precise and it gets personal. Think of your phone, the notification sound, the ping, the buzz, and the reflex that follows it. You reach, you look, you respond. The device issues an impression, and you assent to its demand before you have even consciously registered it. This is not a small thing. This is the structure of modern reaction at its most naked. You have trained your hegemonikon, your rational faculty, the thing Marcus considered the most divine aspect of human nature, to operate as a subordinate to a notification system. You have made your inner emperor answer to a ping, and it goes further. The argument that replays in your head long after it ended, that is not memory. That is repeated assent to an old impression. You are choosing every time the scene returns to grant it authority again. Marcus writes to himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But realize it how? Not through affirmation. Through practice, the daily, unglamorous, relentless practice of catching the impression before the assent, and asking the one question that changes everything. Is this true, or is this what the impression claims? Most of what destroys you is not true. It is the impression's version of events, wearing the costume of certainty. And if that idea feels dangerous, if it quietly threatens a narrative you've held for years about what was done to you, about who is responsible for your current state, then you are exactly where Marcus intended you to be. Because the most threatening philosophy is not the one that attacks your enemies. It is the one that walks quietly into the room and sits down across from your identity. Here is the assumption you arrived with. You know it is there even if you have not named it. The assumption is this. Your reactions reveal who you are. You believe, because culture taught you to believe, because psychology is popularly understood has told you, that what you feel in the moment of provocation is authentic self-disclosure, that the anger is real you, that the anxiety is true you, that the impulse is the purest signal of your genuine nature. Marcus Aurelius would destroy this assumption without raising his voice. What your reactions reveal is not your character. They reveal your conditioning. They reveal the impressions you have been assenting to, unexamined, for years. They reveal the neural pathways carved by repetition, the emotional habits formed in circumstances you did not choose, the inherited patterns of people who shaped you before you were old enough to examine what was being installed. Your reactions are not you. They are the sediment of everything that has happened to you, given authority over everything that will. This is the deeper cut, and it goes in both directions. If you accept that your best reactions are not your truest self, then you also have to accept that your worst ones are not either. The man who screams at his child in a moment of exhaustion is not revealing his soul. He is revealing his current level of self-command, which is to say, his current level of philosophical practice. The reaction is not the verdict on his character. It is evidence of neglect of the inner citadel, To Hegemonikon, that Marcus insisted must be maintained the way a soldier maintains a weapon, constantly. Whether or not battle is coming, because battle is always coming. You have been either condemning yourself for your worst reactions or excusing them as authenticity. Neither is true. Both are escapes from the harder position, which is responsibility without self-punishment, ownership without identity collapse. Now here is where it gets darkest. If your reactions are trained, if they are the product of repeated unchallenged assent, then the life you are currently living has been substantially constructed by your reaction patterns, not by your choices, by your reactions. Think about that with precision. The relationship you are in or not in, how much of its trajectory was shaped by reactions rather than decisions? The career you have, or avoid, or resent, how much was redirected by a moment of reactive anger, reactive fear, reactive withdrawal that you told yourself was instinct? The person you have become in the eyes of the people closest to you, how much of that portrait was painted not by your intentions but by your reactions in the moments that mattered most? You have been authoring your life in the passive voice, and the life that results from reaction is not a life chosen. It is a life happened into. Marcus governed an empire and understood that every weak emperor in Roman history had been at the core a man governed by his impressions, not stupid men, not even cowardly men. Men who had never developed the practice of the pause, the sovereign interval between impression and response, and so were perpetually operated by whoever or whatever knew how to trigger the right reaction, flattered into generosity, provoked into cruelty, frightened into capitulation. The puppet strings were not visible, but they were there. They are always there when the inner citadel is unguarded. You live in a world that has studied your reaction patterns with scientific precision. Every platform you use has been engineered by teams of researchers whose singular goal is to eliminate the pause, to compress the interval between impression and assent to zero, to make your reaction automatic, because your attention, your engagement, your outrage, your fear, when reflexive, is monetizable. When you pause and choose, you become unpredictable. You become sovereign. And sovereign users do not generate the behavioral data that funds the machine. The world has a structural interest in your inability to pause. Let that sit. And yet, here is the way through, and it is uncomfortable in a completely different direction. The practice Marcus prescribes is not withdrawal. It is not the rejection of the world or the suppression of emotion or the performance of cold indifference. The Stoic is not a stone. The way through is engagement with the pause intact, to feel the impression fully, to let the anger be felt, the grief be felt, the frustration be felt, and to exercise assent before it becomes action. You are not being asked to feel less. You are being asked to govern more. The difference is everything. Marcus Aurelius did not write maxims. He wrote commands to himself in the dark when no one was watching. What follows are 4 practices drawn directly from the logic of the Meditations. They are not suggestions. They are the equivalent of training drills for the faculty you have been neglecting. The first weapon, the delay of one breath, Marcus writes of the need to check the movement of impulse, not kill it, check it. The entire architecture of self-command rests on one physical practice, the deliberate insertion of a single breath between stimulus and response. One breath. This is not poetry, this is mechanism. When the impression arrives, the email, the tone, the criticism, the trigger, you breathe consciously, before words, before expression, before physical response. One full breath taken with the awareness that you are a human being exercising rational faculty, not an organism executing a reflex. This is harder than it sounds because it requires you to notice the impression as it arrives, to catch the moment before assent. That noticing is itself a skill. Marcus practiced it daily. He would write to himself each morning about what provocations the day might bring, preparing the faculty of noticing before the impressions arrived. He was not hoping for calm, he was training for it. The uncomfortable requirement, you must practice this in small situations first. The impatience in a supermarket queue, the slow driver, the minor frustration. If you wait for the important moments to begin practicing, you will not have the skill when they arrive. The battlefield is every mundane moment. Start there. The second weapon, the stripping of the impression. Marcus gives this technique directly. He calls it seeing things as they are, stripping away the labels, the judgments, the emotional overlays that the mind adds to raw events and mistaking the addition for the reality. His example is striking. Expensive wine is fermented grape juice. Roasted meat is a dead animal. A purple robe is sheep wool dyed with shellfish blood. He is not saying these things have no value. He is performing a discipline, forcing the mind to see the raw event before the story. Apply it. The colleague did not undermine you. He said 4 specific words in a specific order, in a specific meeting. That is the event. Everything else, the motive you attributed, the humiliation you felt, the narrative of disrespect, is the addition, the impression, not the fact. What actually happened, not what it meant, not how it felt. What happened in the most stripped and physical sense? This question, asked consistently, reveals how rarely you are reacting to reality and how frequently you are reacting to your own elaboration of it. The uncomfortable requirement. You will discover, if you practice this honestly, that many of your most powerful emotional responses are responses to stories you wrote yourself, quickly, without noticing. That discovery requires you to stop exporting blame for your inner state with the confidence you currently do. That is the cost. It is not cheap. The third weapon, the view from above. Marcus returns repeatedly to a practice of radical perspective expansion. Pull back. See the event not from inside your emotion, but from outside your life. From the vantage point of time and scale, he imagines the great emperors before him, the mighty and the feared, and asks, where are they now? The answer is the same. Dust. This is not nihilism, it is proportion. The practice is to place any reactive event against a wider temporal frame, to ask what this moment will mean in 5 years, 10 years, from the vantage point of your deathbed. This is not a trick to dismiss experience. It is a tool for sizing experience accurately. The argument that feels existential, is it? The humiliation that feels permanent, will it be? A crisis that demands immediate reactive combustion, what is its actual footprint in the arc of your one life? The view from above does not make things unimportant, it makes them accurately important. And you will find that most of what triggers your worst reactions carries at any meaningful scale almost no weight. The uncomfortable requirement. This practice will initially feel like suppression. It is not. It is recalibration. The discomfort is the feeling of your sense of proportion returning. Stay with it. The fourth weapon, the morning preparation. Marcus spent time each morning in anticipatory discipline, what he called premeditation of adversity. He would rehearse the difficult things the day might bring, not to create anxiety, but to encounter them in the prepared mind rather than in the surprised reaction. He would remind himself, people will be difficult today. They are ignorant, not evil. Things will not go as planned. That is the nature of external events. I will be irritated, frustrated, slowed, and in those moments, the faculty of choice will be tested. I will practice it. This is the opposite of positive visualization. It is not the imagination of success. It is the imagination of friction, with the prior commitment to govern your response to it already made before the friction arrives. If you rehearse the traffic jam before it happens, not with dread but with the prior decision already committed, the impression when it arrives meets a prepared mind rather than an unguarded one. The pause is already built in. The assent has already been examined. The uncomfortable requirement. This practice takes time in the morning that most people believe they do not have. Marcus commanded an empire. He found it. What you are really saying, if you refuse this, is that the governance of your inner state is less important than the first 20 minutes you spend with a screen. Perhaps that is the most honest thing you will read today. Come back to the morning. Come back to the traffic. The car cuts across. The heat rises in the chest. The old version of you is already moving toward the reaction. The horn, the curse, the 20 minutes of replayed indignation that serves nothing and costs everything. But something is different now. Not because the anger isn't there. It is. But the anger arrives and meets something. A fraction of a second that did not used to exist. A pause. A breath. A voice that is no longer the impression but the observer of the impression, asking with complete dispassion, "And what will I add to this?" Nothing. You add nothing. The car moves. The moment passes. You remain exactly who you chose to be, not because the world cooperated, but because you governed the only territory you have ever truly owned. That is what the whole of Marcus Aurelius's life's private work was building toward. Not a philosophy of texts and arguments and academic positions. A practice. A daily, unglamorous, relentless practice of catching yourself in the moment before the fall and choosing in that moment to stand. You will not perfect this. Marcus did not perfect it either. The meditations are not a record of a man who achieved unshakable inner command. They are the record of a man who had to keep reminding himself, because the work of self-governance never ends. The frontier is always the present moment. The enemy is always the current impression. The battle is always just beginning. This is not cause for discouragement. It is cause for honesty, because the alternative, the life lived entirely in reaction, is not a life of authentic freedom. It is a life in which every external event, every other person's behavior, every notification and insult and inconvenience holds a lever inside you, and someone or something is always pulling it. You are being played like an instrument, and the music is not yours. Marcus Aurelius chose otherwise, not because he was born calm, not because the empire was kind to him, not because life offered him easy impressions. He chose otherwise because he understood and wrote the understanding to himself in the darkness, alone because he needed the reminder that the only kingdom worth ruling is the one that cannot be taken from you. No one can reach inside and move you unless you let them in. You have been letting them in. The door is yours. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. What is the reaction you keep giving that is costing you the most? And what would your life look like if you simply stopped?